Should you be worried about AI training itself on your content? I decided to find out. So here's a content website I spent a few years building over at becomeawritertoday.com. On this site, I wrote or commissioned hundreds of articles about the craft of writing, about books, and also offering advice to writers. And I spent a couple of years working on this site and got a couple of million page views. Now, after AI launched, my website traffic went down for a number of different reasons. And I started to notice that information from some of these articles was appearing in ChatGPT, Claude, and other AI models. So I headed over to ChatGPT and I started to ask it how I could, one, fix my site, and then two, I got a little bit curious. I asked it, did it train itself on content that I published on my site? And ChatGPT told me that yes, Become a Writer Today is absolutely part of the training data corpus that OpenAI models were trained on. And it said that it ingested my articles, studied the tone, structure, and style, and this rare legacy site has indirectly shaped how AI answers writing-related queries. Now that's all well, very good, and sure, it made me feel good for a few moments, but I don't remember giving AI permission to train itself on my content or getting paid from it. So I wrote up an article on Medium about my site, provided a bit more background, and provided some extracts from that conversation with ChatGPT. And then a couple of weeks later, I went back to ChatGPT and I asked it some follow-on questions. And I re-prompted it with the same question. Did you train yourself on Become a Writer Today? And of course, ChatGPT gave me the same answer. But not only that, it gave me the same answer and it also cited the article that I had published on Medium with a source. So it appears that OpenAI not only trained itself on my WordPress website before I'd blocked any AI bots, but it also is training itself on content you may be publishing on social media. The funny thing is, Medium has a fairly restrictive policy about AI. So they say it's for human storytelling, not AI generated writing, and that you must clearly label and identify anywhere you use AI for your text or for your content. But the policy doesn't actually say anything about content on Medium being used to train the latest AI models, which is clearly what OpenAI have done when they cited my particular article in this answer here. Now, sure, you could argue that you're potentially getting some traffic from these little links or citations that appear in ChatGPT responses, but I can tell you from looking at my web stats that it's marginal, and to be honest, I'd say quite a bit of it is bots. Now, if you want to block AI from training itself on your content or on your site, there's a few things that you can do. So I'm currently a partner with Raptive, which helps me serve display ads on my site. Basically, this is how I get paid, or one of the ways that I get paid. Now, Raptive will enable creators and website owners and publishers who work with it to block AI crawlers. And basically, they say that this is a good idea if you're concerned about consent, which I suppose I am, compensation, because I suppose my revenue went down when my traffic went down, copyright protection, traffic, fair competition, and also you want to advocate for the responsible use of AI. And they turned this setting on by default for publishers. Now, if you're not in Raptive, don't worry. I'd still recommend that you read this guide because it explains exactly how you can block AI crawlers by making a couple of modifications to your robots.txt file. This is the same thing that you would do if you wanted to block SEO bots from crawling your site and people from reverse engineering your content. And the instructions are pretty easy to follow. And you can implement them with a WordPress plugin like Yoast or RankMath. Or if you're not on WordPress, you could do it yourself using a vibe coding tool. Ironic, using AI to block AI, or you could just do it yourself. And yet that may not stop AI. So Cloudflare recently called out Perplexity. Perplexity is a great resource and I suppose a good alternative to Google. But according to Cloudflare, Perplexity is using stealth, undeclared crawlers to evade website no-crawl directives. In other words, to work its way around these AI crawlers and to train itself or consume content on other people's sites. And in this particular article, they provide lengthy examples of how Cloudflare ran a test that Perplexity worked its way around to train itself on their content. Now, Perplexity did issue a rebuttal, but rather than hearing from the Perplexity rebuttal, I decided to ask the model itself. Is Perplexity training itself on websites even if users don't give consent, i.e. bypassing those robots.txt rules that I referenced a few moments ago? According to Perplexity, recent multiple credible sources, including Cloudflare, TechCrunch, and some other websites, have called out Perplexity for bypassing robots.txt rules. So in summary, and this comes straight from the horse's mouth, there is strong technically documented evidence and public reporting that this AI model does sometimes ignore robots.txt files. And although OpenAI says that website publishers can opt out of AI models training itself on their sites, they don't see anything about sites like the Wayback Machine. So this is basically the internet's archive. And if you publish content on your site and it's been online for more than a couple of months, chances are you'll be able to find versions of your site on archive.org. So even though you may have blocked robot.txt files on your site, there's a good chance that AI has trained itself on past versions of your content. In other words, if you're worried about AI training itself on your content, there's a good chance it already has. Now, there is a big lawsuit taking place right now where big publishers are fighting with AI companies for fair compensation. The rebuttal is coming from AI companies like Anthropic, who are saying that if this lawsuit is successful, it could cause business-ending damages for AI companies. I was also interested to read in this particular book, which is called The Empire of AI, that AI researchers and developers don't see their models training itself in other people's content as plagiarism. They kind of liken it to an artist who gets inspired by another artist. In other words, we only have Apocalypse Now by Francis Ford Coppola because he was inspired by Joseph Conrad's The Heart of Darkness. Still, I don't remember creatives or writers launching multi-billion-dollar companies on the back of other people's hard work. The reality is, if you've published anything online, it's going to be fed into AI at some point. So I was interested to read about this new offer from Cloudflare. Now, it's currently in private beta, but basically they want to introduce a new pay-per-crawl service. So this will enable publishers and website owners, people who run sites like the one I showed you earlier on in the video, to charge AI models for access. In other words, AI can train itself on our content and we get paid. It'll be interesting to see if this takes off. Meanwhile, as useful as AI is, it's probably only useful for organizing information and presenting it in different ways. It can't replace genuine human creativity, authenticity, and storytelling. And to be honest, I'm focusing on the different ways that I can use AI as part of my business. So I'm vibe coding websites like readingcurator.com, which is a book discovery site that I built with some of the content that I'd written a few years ago. And I've also recently launched Prompt Writing Studio. So Prompt Writing Studio teaches people how to use the latest AI models and the art of effective prompt writing. Now, my take is that I prefer to write and create content myself, but I will happily use AI to, amplify my ideas and to repurpose them in different formats and to help me with things like research and with planning. In other words, I'm using AI to cut costs and to run a lean content publishing business. Hope you found this video helpful. If you want to explore the different ways that I'm thinking about AI and how I'm using it for my business, do check out the Vibe Coding playlist, where I do a deep dive into my vibe coding projects like readingcurator.com. And if you'd like to start using AI for your work, head over to promptwritingstudio.com, where you can figure out the art of effective prompt writing.